Welcome to the Scrum chat room. And today we want to talk about Scrum events. And I'm going to be covering different aspects when it comes to Scrum event. First, we'll look at the importance of Scrum events. Secondly, why even talk about event? Why is Scrum organized around event? We are going to zoom into that. And I'm going to also answer the question which event? What event? What's event all about? And then I will go and talk about event calendars. Event calendars, we'll look at the chronology. Which event should come after which and why should it be organized that way? And lastly, I'm going to go through all the events and we'll look at the best practices. And of course, I'm going to take your questions. So, uh, if you're joining us right now, make sure you hit the like and the share button. Invite someone to come on board because we are going to look at events. If you kind of master events and the rationale why why Scrum is built around event, it's going to be easier for you to become an effective Scrum Master. So I need all the Scrum Masters on board. Put on your shoes, put together your questions. We are going to handle all the questions at the end of the discussion. But then feel free as well to also put in your comments, put in any questions that you probably have, why we are having this conversation, and then we can all handle it at the end of the day. All right. So we're talking about agile, right? So I guess we all understand what agile is all about. But if this is your first time actually hearing the word agile or actually hearing the word scrum, let us take it from the foundation. That's what is important. And to all my returning viewers, hello. I know it's been a while. I've been online, but the next 5 days I'm going to treat different topics. So I'm definitely going to do like live streaming for the next 5 days. So if you want to learn a lot, or if you want something that you want me to treat within the next 5 days, it's a challenge I'm doing for myself. You might want to put it. Now, let's go back and talk about agile. When we talk about agile, what comes to your mind? It's a very important aspect, or what I actually advise anyone who is in the agile space is that for you to become a master of something, you need to call it by your own name, right? You need to call it by your own name. Now we can say, okay, agile is a mindset, it's a way of delivering product incrementally and all of that. But how do you, as a person, kind of define it? How do you see that word? Now, until you start seeing things from your own perspective, it becomes very difficult to articulate them in a sense where someone can say, oh, wow, you know what? This is kind of really different. So when we talk about agile, we're talking about an approach on how we deliver a product to our customer, right? So with agile, the agile principle, their concept, and when we look at the values of agile, we're looking at what? We're looking at communication, we are looking at collaboration, we're looking at accepting changes, right? So the core concept of agile is how can we better deliver business value, or how can we build a product that our customer love, but then also ensure that they are part of the process. Now, this now gives you a rationale or an idea why we talk about events a lot. Because if you want someone to be part of your what you're making, what happened? You build events that you can invite them in, and you would now have the opportunity to showcase this to them. Let's say, for instance, why do we celebrate birthdays? These are events, right? Because we want to bring people that care about us to celebrate with us, right? And why don't we just say, okay, let's celebrate 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and all about, right? We want that it's about short occurrence. If let's say you wait for 10 years to call somebody, they might not even remember who you are. It's quite a long time, right? So because we want to get them involved, because we want satisfaction, because we want to engage them, we build around events. Okay, for those that are joining in, also let me know where you're connecting from so that I can give you a shout out. I see David. David, yes, David, would you assist do interviews? prepare you for interviews, not do interviews. Can prepare you for interviews, and you can send me a text. You can see my number on the screen, right? You can send me a text, and we can talk about that after that. But now, the goal is to learning. The goal is to learn. Now, we all established that when we talk about agile, we are talking about how can we deliver, and it's based on how we think. Yes, it's based on mindset. It's a way of doing things. Yes, it's a way of doing things within a team, goals and all of that. This is good, right? This is good way of doing things within a team and goal. So now this is the book definition. It's a mindset, it's a way of doing things, but I'd rather prefer you bring it to your own way of calling it, right? I always say that for me, it's about working with a customer. You want to deliver this product, you want them to be part of it, so it makes more sense to you. Now, one of the biggest mistake a lot of people do is that when they talk about agile, or when they say, "Oh, tell me about your journey as a Scrum Master," or "Tell me about your experience in Scrum." Now, the mistake, it's a big mistake. They start saying, "Oh, you know what? As a Scrum Master working with West Fargo, I help my team to facilitate event and make sure I take away all the impediments and all of that." Now, why do people give this kind of analogy? They give the kind of analogy because of the way they have understood agile, about events, about mindset. Now, all of this is important, but the goal of agile is not about to organize event. It's not about to remove impediment. It's about to deliver a business value where we have a customer engaged in the process. So is this is what get us to how do we do this? How do we deliver a business value to a client and then help them to be part of the process? And then now the answer comes in. Now let's build events where we can invite them to this event and showcase them what they're doing. Let's build event where the team can also collaborate in order to deliver this business value to the customer. So agile, it's all about delivering business value and it's less about events, right? Which is the angle where we're coming in to clarify what events are and what value they add in the concept of you implementing agile. So if you've been thinking that agile it's all about events, then you are getting it from a wrong angle. Yes, all of these events are important, but this event will definitely not make any value if we're not talking about the business value. And that is why one of the main questions which you are being asked when you're in an interview is, okay, tell me about your last position as a scrum master, or tell me about this. Now, the reason they're asking that question is not for you to start telling them, "Oh, I was working with a team, I was facilitating events, I was removing impediments." It's about why did they need you in the team? All right. Before any company is in need of a scrum master, is because they are implementing a business goal. They want to deliver something. So your role as a scrum master is to help in the process of delivering a business goal. Now, while you are in the process of delivering the business goal, you leverage events. You leverage event to deliver that. So that understanding help you to know how to discuss about event and to know how to incorporate this when you are having a conversation with the hiring manager and all of that. Okay, so now we have the foundation of what events are all about and how we can approach events from the business perspective. Now, events only come in to support a value we are delivering, right? Events only come in to support an approach, right? To support an approach. Let's say we are to deliver the same business value, but we're not using an agile approach. We don't have need of events. If we can still deliver value with waterfall approach, right? We don't need to build around event. We just do it in our normal way. So we understand now what events are, and then um talking about now when we understand that events are what events are. Now the second thing about event, you understand that events occur around what? Around specific happening, right? Now, let's look at a non-agile world. Let's say we're celebrating an annual jubilee, right? Let's say we're celebrating a birthday. Let's say we're celebrating something. Is built around. You cannot celebrate a birthday without a person. You cannot organize an event without a business value or without something that you want to achieve. So events are organized around happenings, right? And this brings us to the point of what are the different events that we should be organizing, right? Now, with this knowledge, we now start thinking about, is there only one approach to implement agile, or are there different approaches? Of course, there are different approaches. You can implement through the Kanban, you can implement through Scrum, you can implement through Save, you can implement through Less, you can implement through Spotify, right? There's so many approaches, there's so many agile approaches out there. Now, all of these approaches, the reason why we need to pay attention to these approaches, because all of these approaches event in a different way. So when often we think about Scrum, or we think about Agile, or we think about our sprint planning, daily stand-up, review, and retrospective, right? But it's not in all environment that we are going to implement all of this. Let's say you work with a Kanban team, right? Sometimes a Kanban team might not need a review meeting. It's important. They might not call it a review meeting. Sometimes a Kanban team might not need a daily stand up based on what they're working on. Right. Sometimes the Kanban team might not need a retrospective. They like, I mean, needing this as event. These are stuff that might happen at any random moment, but they don't build solely on event. Now, but then most, and also understand that most of us work in Kanban team that are more of a Scrum approach where we do planning, daily stand up, and all of this. This is more of a Scrum ban approach, right? With pure Kanban, there are no specific event. It's based on what we're delivering. Right now, the reason why I'm getting a bit into a bit deeper into this conversation is to help you understand events, right? So how to call the events and all of that. Okay, now when we also look from another perspective in a PU Scrum based on the Scrum Guide, now everything about Agile is not a Scrum Guide, guys. I know most often we're familiar with the Scrum Guide, but everything about Agile is not a Scrum Guide. Right. We have Scale Agile has its own different approach from from the Scrum Guide. Right. It leverages many concepts from the Scrum Guide, but it has its own unique approach. Now, one of those is that okay, with Scale Agile, we consider um, backlog refinement as a key event, while the Scrum Guide will not really count that as an event, right? So I'm just giving you some of the differences why you're implementing different approach. Don't always think that it's going to be the same. And this is why practicing is very important, because sometimes we feel like the way we read it in the book is the way it happens live at work. No, completely different stuff. Okay, so let's look at a typical Scrum environment uh, from the concept of the Scrum Guide, right? Now, a typical Scrum environment, we have events including sprint planning, daily stand up, backlog refinement, spring review, and spring retrospective. The question now is, how do we now implement, or how do we plan all of this in a calendar? Is there a specific sequence recommended for organizing Scrum events? Is there a specific sequence recommended for organizing Scrum event? That's a question for us, right? Or must it always start with spring planning, or can we start with a retrospective, or should we start with spring zero and all of that? If I get an environment, how do I know that this environment is first, this is second, and this is third? Now, when you think about this, now think about you as a person, or think about you in a position where you want to deliver a specific business value to somebody, right? Now, if I order in, let's say you're a dealer in the automobile, in cars, and I order a car to you, or let's say you own a restaurant, right? and I say, okay, look, I have an event and I want you to deliver XYZ within this period of time. Now, how are you going to approach that? Are you going to start with delivering, or are you going to start with planning on how to get this to me? It's just a common approach that helps you to visualize, like, oh, which one is the first event? I'm confused. Which one is the last event? Now, there's a chronology on how things are done. We start with planning, right? Because if you don't plan, you cannot execute. So, logically, the first event in Scrum is planning. Now, in some environment, we might talk about Spring Zero, which means that we are getting ready to start planning. Now, if you work in a safe environment, the first event will be PI planning. So, in any case, we always start with planning. For those that work in a safe environment, there are two cycles of planning. We have the agile release, the planning at the level of the art, which is the agile release train, and the planning at the level of the team. But then let's focus on the planning at the level of the team today. So we start with spring planning. Now, when we start with spring planning give us an idea of the work that we need to do, right? And then when we talk about spring planning, now I want to explain this to you without using a typical way Scrum is going to do it. I want you to understand like someone is narrating a story to you. Now, when we talk about planning, what helps you to plan? If I say that, okay, I need you to deliver, let's say, I need you to deliver pasta for 30 people for dinner tomorrow. What makes you say, yes, I can do that, or I'm not sure I can do that? Now, what helps you is that you know your resources, right? You know your capacity. So, your capacity will determine if you can do this or not. So, whenever we talk about spring planning, the stuff that comes to your mind is that, yes, we need to look at the capacity. Do we have the capacity to deliver? Now, it's based on my capacity that I'm going to pick exactly what I'm going to deliver. Now, my capacity now help me to know the amount of work. So, capacity is all about the resources and the availability of the people. Now, the amount of work is what we call in Scrum the velocity. Velocity means I'm capable of committing to this, and the capacity means I have the resources that can deliver this amount. So it's based on our capacity that we can determine how much we can do, which is velocity. Now, when you determine that, what happened? You need to now estimate what effort is needed, how many hours or how many days or whatsoever each of the person in your team is required to put in order to complete the work. Because if you don't estimate, right, in Agile, we do estimation either by story point, either by hour, using the poker planning. Now, the concept of poker planning is a whole lot of concept which we can illustrate in one of these sessions if we have many people interested to learn more about that. But then pocket planning is just an approach that helps us to have a conversation on the table, right? Let's assume that we five people that need to collaborate to deliver a specific piece of work. We're collaborating. Now, the way I understand it will be different from the way B understand it, will be different from the way C understand it. Now, poker planning simply means that we give everybody the chance to say how they understand it. And now, based on how we all understand it, we can both clarify ourselves why we are thinking that way. In that way, we have a consensus that align with everybody. That's poker planning. So in the spring planning, we have our capacity, which is available resources, and that help us now to master our velocity, which is how much we can take. And then now we do the estimation to gain clarity and alignment. When everybody is aligned to what we can do because we're working as a team, we now come to our spring goal, right? We now come to a goal. And now the question I often get from a lot of people is, okay, how do I write down my spring goal, or how do I know how to write down the spring goal? Now, a spring goal is not just one sentence, right? A spring goal simply means what is the summary of what you're going to be completing during this spring. Now, when we talk about spring, it's a defined period, most often an average of 2 weeks, but it could be 1 week, it could be 3 weeks, it could be maximum a month. That's a recommendation. But in most of the cases, we go with 2 weeks because that is good time enough for us to execute and come back and reflect on it. And now, when you look at Agile, which is even the reason we talk about events and spring, Agile says that what? We want our customer to be there. We want feedback early. We want to be able to collaborate effectively. So for us to implement Agile, that is why we build our planning around smaller circles that enable us to collaborate, that enable us to have feedback, and that enable us to learn and move to the next level. So Agile on the whole concept, one of the value is that what? Pay cheap, pay fast. No, it's pay cheaply and then fast, right? Pay cheaply and learn fast. And one of the importance of agile is also that it helps us to be able, since we're having this conversation, it's able, we have the capability to agree on some certain things very early on time and get them in the market because everyone is in alignment with that. All right. Now we now have completed what? Spring planning. Okay. Now after spring planning, the next event that comes in chronology is the daily stand up. Now the daily stand up is a synchronization meeting. It's not a status update meeting, although especially for those who work as scrum masters, right? You hear your team members say that, oh, Francis, this is my update. Today I'm working on this. Today I'm working on this. Now that might seem like correct, but if you're a scrum master that really wants your team to grow, you want to disrupt that approach of your team member giving you update, right? Why is it important? We all know that a scrum team is a self-accountable team, so they don't report to you, the scrum master. And now, secondly, what happened is that what I mostly advise my Scrum Master to do, or what I also do as a Scrum Master, is when we have an update, most often I like, okay, uh, can you give us an idea of what is happening and what are some of the challenges that can stop us from achieving this as planned? Now, this gives them now the possibility not just to give you update and tell you everything is okay, to reflect. Okay, is there something that can stop us not from achieving this as planned? This is a very powerful question, and it's going to definitely change the result you get. Most often, the reason many teams are not performance is because we just give update, and no one is pushing them to think about what are possible stuff that can stop me from not achieving this. Right? Nobody's thinking about that. So that's a way to tweak that around it. Now, daily stand up is just an event that help us to gain alignment, to look at all possible blockers, and then we can now address it. Now, looking at the time box, okay, I know with the Scrum Guide, there are time box of 4 hours, 8 hours of sprint planning, but in practice, in reality, sprint planning most often, maximum you're going to have 1 hour. In worst case scenario, you might even have up to 2 hours, right? The shorter, the better. People don't like to stay in meetings. Of course, the daily stand up is recommended 15 minutes, but with most of those who have Kanban teams with about 15, 20 team members in the team, you can obviously complete that in 30 minutes. So you always have some Kanban teams have their daily stand up, even up to 30 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on that. So there are a lot of flexibility on this, which is what you should pay attention to, right? Now, after that, now I always recommend the third event to be the backlog refinement. Why? Backlog refinement is more like you're replenishing, right? You're replenishing to take over. Think about you, you're planning for a journey, right? And let's say you need to drive for a very long distance. What happened? You need to ensure that your car is ready for that journey, not on the day. So backlog refinement is to ensure that we are ready for the day of the sprint planning. So, and that is why it comes in the middle of a sprint, but then you are not refining the sprint you're working on. You are refining what you will implement in the next sprint. Right. So, and backlog refinement simply means that we are going through every story that is in our backlog. We're trying to prioritize with ensuring that everyone understands the details. We're ensuring that it has a story point attached to it. Now, the question a lot of people also ask is that, all right, should we assign story during backlog refinement and all of that? Or where should we start assigning stories to our developer? Now, in Scrum or in Agile, we do self assignment. Now, self assignment must not necessarily mean that the developer go and pick what they need to do. You, the Scrum Master, can facilitate. Now, the way I do it is that I go through my team members. I say, okay, Mark, let's see what you can take. What do you think you can take based on our backlog prioritization? They know that they cannot take something from the bottom of the backlog because we're working in terms of priority. And they're like, okay, I should be able to do A, B, C, and D, right? We prioritize and they pick from there, and you go like that until you're done with us. So, this the backlog refinement happen in the middle. Now we are now left with two events: the review and the retrospective. It's recommended that the review happen on the last day of the event. Why? Because we are reviewing what we have implemented. Right now, there is also a big confusion between review and demo, like spring review and spring demo. These are all events, it's the same event. Now, why do we talk about spring review? Within spring review, we do the demo. Demo simply means that we are illustrating how what we have built work. Right. I'm illustrating this is what I built and this is how it works. Now, review simply means that I'm going through and I'm showcasing, I'm not demonstrating, I'm showcasing. I can do a review of, let's say, I can do a review of my phone, right? I tell you, okay, the phone has a camera and all of that. That's a review. Now, I can do a demo of this phone where I'm punching and I'm demonstrating how to use certain functionality. So a demo or a sprint demo happens in the spring review. So they are not two different events. Now, the last is the retrospective. It's recommended that the retrospective happen on the last day of the event, right? But notwithstanding, and now Scrum recommend that it happens on the last day of the event because they say that um, they're going to be improvement items, and then you can take these improvement items and then add on your product backlog to improve them. Let's assume that you're a scrum master and you manage three teams. Right now, and let's assume that you're working in a safe environment. In a safe environment, there's alignment where all your teams start their iteration planning on the same day and close on the same day. It's not possible for you to run all of this event in the last day. So we have flexibility in practice that it's possible for you to push the spring retrospective to occur in an already existing spring, which means you can launch your spring planning without doing a retrospective. And maybe the next day after everyone is settled, you can now run the retrospective for the previous spring. Now, you're going to ask me, what about the improvement items? Remember, the improvement items, when you add them to your backlog, they are not assigned story points. So even if you add improvement item, maybe 2 days when the spring is gone, it's not going to change your scope because they are not going to increase your points. And in most of the cases, improvement items you can just document them on on your conference page or wheresoever your company hosts their data. You just need to make sure that you appoint someone to follow it, right? So we have gone through all the different events, and then we have given what? We're giving you what are the best practices. Now, there's some other events that are beyond the normal Scrum environment. One of those events is the Scrum of Scrum, right? The Scrum of Scrum typically happens in a scale agile environment. I know in a pure Scrum environment, um, some people host a kind of Scrum, but it's not a Scrum of Scrum. A Scrum of Scrum is purely for Scrum Master. Now you need to learn how to differentiate a scrum of scrum from what? From a community of practice. If it involves maybe other product manager, team members, and all of that coming together, it's a community of practice. It's not a scrum of scrum, right? Scrum of scrum is purely for scrum master, and it happens in a scale agile environment. And when we also have the scrum masters and the PO coming together to gain alignment together with RLTEs and product manager, we call that the art scene. Art is agile release train scene. That's scale environment. If you don't have experience within the scale environment, this might be a bit confusing, which is why I don't want to go into those details today. We also have other events like release planning that may occur, but then these are not like standard events. These happen based on the product you're working on. If there's need for release planning, that also happen. Of course, I'm going to take out also time, maybe tomorrow, and then we're going to dive into PI planning and what happens within PI planning. That's what a safe environment as well. And I think tomorrow is a Saturday. I also will be launching a safe training certification tomorrow for those who are interested in getting certified as a safe scrum master. Just send me a text, right? You can see my screen on this stuff. Send me a text and then we can take it from there. All right. So I'm going to now give maybe the next 15 to 20 minutes for us to have a conversation. So this is time for you to put in your questions and answers, and let's dive into that. All right. So time to put in any question you have about event. We can all clarify ourselves and all of that. Um, okay, perfect. So we have like some beautiful comments there. Time to put in your question. You can put in any question you want. The Irene say, if a team member share the possible roadblock in the daily stand up, how do you go about addressing it, or what are the steps to take to future blogger? Okay, this is a very important question. Now, for daily stand up, if a team member share a blocker, and if something that you can address it immediately. Let's say that I can say, oh, I'm working on this team. I was been working on this story, but I was blocked because I was unable to figure out how to apply quality control, how to do quality check stuff there. Now that's a blocker, right? Now immediately you raise and you raise up that point. Tim, is there someone that could help? Let's say Irene complete this, and then let's say we have Collins say, oh yeah, I can do that. Say okay, Irene, link up with Collins after this daily stand up, and they're gonna help you. That is solved immediately. But if it's something that requires us to invest more than 2 minutes to figure out a solution, we put it as a main point. We take that to the parking lot, right? So at the end of when everyone are giving their update now, those who are engaged will stay back. Now, if something that we cannot address it immediately, maybe it requires a management intervention or so, you document that on the comment of that story. I encourage a lot to use comments, even when they're giving update, especially for your team members who are always lazy, giving the same update over and over again. Use comment section. Put a comment in what they're saying so that if they give the same excuse, you can now hold them accountable. That's one of the way to easily get stuff done for your team. All right, so I hope that actually answer your question. Um, now next question is Victor say, all right, that was also Victor's contribution to that question. Then retrospect on how to mitigate. Yes, so that was also that. Okay, yes, somebody's asking about the PO certification. Uh, I'm gonna be live again tomorrow about this time, so remind me. I'll give you a date for the PO certification. But you can also send me a text, right? And I'm gonna work that out. What's the difference between impediments and blocker? Who addresses both? There's no clear cut between impediments and blocker, right? I know people try to go deep to say, you know what, impediments is maybe something that you can easily address, and a blocker is, but there's no clear difference. You can call it any name, right? Who addresses those? Who addresses both? There's no particular person assigned to address. The first thing is that you don't even know that this is going to happen, right? If it's something that we know before, it's a risk and we can address that risk. But then impediments or blockers are something that come up suddenly. So you cannot say this is the person addressing this. So when it comes up, we have a conversation and we see who is the best person to handle this. Let's talk about an impediment or a blocker, right? It's an impediment at the same time a blocker. Let's say one of our licenses or one of our licenses are expiring, and my team can no longer implement their work. Right now, that's an impediment or a blocker that only the management can solve. So I need to escalate that to management. Right now, let's say that someone is having trouble, let's say loading their software on their computer. Right now, that's something the IT desk can solve. Somebody out from the team. So whosoever have the capacity is the person responsible to solve that problem. How do you know that a Scrum Master has matured? Very important. We know that the Scrum Master has matured. Number one, their team. Now, we evaluate Scrum Master based on their teams. That's why there's no what there is no close follow up when you are a scrum master. Nobody checks on you. They check on you on how your team is performing. We know that you're a good scrum master when we see the output of your team. So if we know that a scrum master or a scrum team, not a scrum master, sorry. Well, a scrum team, majority of a scrum team is based on two major stuff: communication. They're on top of their communication, collaboration, and then their technical depths and bugs are very low. This is a very simple way to know that okay, this team is mature. They communicate, they collaborate, and then their built-in quality is very high. Or the alternative for built-in quality is that the technical depth is right down and stuff. Now you also and this, if their built-in quality is very high, it means they're going to have positive feedback from the stakeholders, right? So you can target it from um, different angle. Could you share more light on backlog refinement? Okay, so um, let me use another example. I want to assume that I work at Target, right? And Target has a storehouse. Now, in the storehouse, what get into the storehouse, which is equivalent to our backlog, is every possible item that need to be sown, right? But not everything is displayed on the store for customer to buy because some of this stuff are seasonal. Now, if we want to do refinement, we go into that storehouse and sort what people need for this summer. So we are refining our backlog. So backlog refinements, there are a whole list of item on what people need to complete, but then they need to complete them in a specific order. So refinement simply means we're going to all the work that need to be done, and we want to sort out what is important and make sure that it's ready before the day that we want to start implementing it. Right. Now you can also think about this like those who work in the most of these shopping center, right? During the night, what do? They go to the storehouse, they sort whatsoever is needed, but they start by looking at the most important things that the clients are going to be needing in the morning. They start restocking them. They don't just restock. So they're refining, and even in the storehouse, the way they position it, the prioritize thing is based on how we are going to easily get them out. So hope that helps. All right, and also there was a very big area. There was another detailed elaboration of blockers and impediments uh, by Olufumi. So you can also check that detail out and get more in depth from that. And then Luwale says, is sizing and estimation In sizing an estimation, how do we accurately estimate the effort required for user story or task? What unit of measurement should we use? Story points, hours. Okay, perfect. Let's start with the unit. The unit is based on what the team accept. Whether we're using story points or hours, we cannot say one is more efficient than the other. Now, the reason why story points are recommended in most environments is because with story point, we're looking at the effort, right? Effort and estimate simply means anything can happen. Now, if you go by hours and I say this is 5 hours, I'll come check on you. Hey, why didn't you finish it in 5 hours? We tag this 5 hours. So hours get people to now start looking at asking specific question. Why didn't you complete this in 5 hours? Oh, this stuff is one day. It's been overdue. What's happening? Right? So it get us to micromanage, and we want our Scrum team to be self-organized. That's why we use points as a measure of what effort, which means that anything can happen. It's just a guesstimate of us doing that. So how do we estimate accurately? Most often is based from learning. There's no way to say that, oh, this is an approach to know that this is effective or not. Now, what you can do to enhance estimation is that let everyone member of the team have an opinion and have a conversation on that. Right? When you put together this conversation and you, the Scrum Master, facilitate to get a clear understanding, now you move closer to um, accuracy. But this is also what you learn from time. And that's why they don't just evaluate your performance based on one meeting or two meetings. It's over the period of 3 months because they assume that you've learned consistently, and then you now have the more like a pattern you have observed to help improve the process. All right. What are some of the challenges you've seen in safe environment? Safe environment, collaboration and alignment are some of our very big challenges, right? Remember that we all need to come together to plan in the PI. There are a lot of dependency that happens across the team. So collaboration and communication, if you are collaborating with a team where their scrum master is not proactive and their team members are not willing to give you the information, it becomes a very big impediment. That's a major impediment that is there as well. Now, there are also impediments that may happen at the level of planning, at the level of program planning, where if you don't actually understand how to resolve same iteration dependency, how to be able to appropriately roam all the risks before you launch the PI, you realize that in the middle of the PI, you may end up changing futures, and this bring a lot of delays, and you might not be able to complete your work. Okay, perfect. Now let's see what happened next. We have 7 more minutes. Let's see how many questions we can answer in the next 7 more minutes, right? Um, is it necessary to do a pre-PI session with team before the grand event? All right, very important question. Immediately we'll launch a PI. The planning for the next PI is happening throughout the implementation period, right? So PI is not just what you see during that 2 days. Conversation has been going in the background before even the IP iteration. So you don't allow PI to happen only on that day. It should be a continuous process. It should be something you talk about over and over again with your team member. All right. So Victor also get another contribution for Viola in terms of effort. So that's good. Um, Commitment versus complete. All right. So, can you share more light on what is a healthy backlog? A healthy backlog simply means that it is well prioritized, right? And most often we recommend that we plan at least 2 sprint deep. That's a healthy backlog. All the stories are ready, at least the stories that we are going to be looking forward in the next sprints are all have acceptance criteria, are all estimated, and team members have had conversation about them. Yeah, so we have at least a quite good number of items that are ready to go. We can say the backlog is healthy and it's well prioritized. Right. Um, Please elaborate more on committed versus completed. Does a team completing it commit work correlated to good Scrum? Committed versus completed. Committed simply means that we committed. You mostly see this in the in a safe environment, right? During the PI, we have committed versus uncommitted. Committed simply means we have agreed that we do this. By the end of the day, completed is what we have done. Now you can also look at what they call the velocity chart. It gives you what we committed and what we completed. At the start of the spring, we agreed to do this, but at the end of the spring, we completed this. So that's what that means. Um, Yes, SOS Scrum of Scrum is for scale environment, not necessary for PI planning. Yes, during PI planning we have Scrum of Scrum, which is now called Coaches Sync in alignment with the new release of Safe 6.0. But then other scale environment can also have Scrum of Scrum, right? For instance, if you have less is another approach, which is they don't do PI planning, they do something very close, but they also have Scrum or Scrum, right? So Scrum or Scrum happen in a scale environment during PI as well and during iteration implementation. Starting a new role with a new team, how do you build trust? Communicate, not as a Scrum Master, communicate as you, right? The mistake we make is that we want to be good Scrum Masters and then we fail to know that before we are Scrum Master, we are first of all us. So be yourself, learn about your team members, and really be there for them. That's how you build trust, right? Let's say, let's say now if we're doing chat here, right? You ask them question, I'm answering. We're not building any trust. We're communicating, but we're not building trust. But let's say that if, for instance, Irene start asking, "Hey Francis, how are you doing today? What's up for today?" And we start communicating based on that personal level. Now I'm building trust to learn more about that person. One of the way in which you can build trust is leveraging icebreaker. You also have like we connect card you can use to ask like to ask questions where your team can just share and laugh. Is what is one thing that you're thinking to accomplish before the end of this year? These are key questions that get the more you know someone at the personal level, the more you build trust with them. All right. What a gamification Scrum Master, does it have anything to do with events facilitation? If so, how's that done? Look like a new trend now. Anybody's coming up with their own name, or you have Spotify Scrum Master gamification and all that stuff. So go ask Mr. Google what that really mean and do that. There might be any terms or so. Sometimes if people ask you about that, you can ask them to throw more light as well. Can you please share more light on what a healthy backlog? Also, kind of explain what dependency are in layman terms. Okay, I already explained what a healthy backlog is. Dependency, okay. Now, dependency are very visible in a scale agile environment. Why? Because we might have about 7 teams collaborating to build one product. Right. Let's say that a team is working on the mobile application. The other team is working on the data engineering. Now, for the team in mobile application to kick off their work, all the data engineering work must be done. So they are dependent on the data engineering team to kick off their own work. So they must stay in communication with the person responsible in the data engineering team to complete their work before they pick up. So that's dependency. Now, if within the same team, right, it's more on story mapping and prioritization. If it's happened within the same team, we don't really call it a dependency. That's the dependency, but it's more on effective prioritization and story mapping so that we know what comes afterward. But then in most of the cases, dependency, it's when you're dealing with two different teams. The work of one depends on the work of the other. So, which method is better for poker planning? Which method is better? Poker planning. Oh, poker planning and Fibonacci sequence is the same thing. There's no difference between that, right? We use the Fibonacci sequence when we are doing our poker planning. The Fibonacci sequence is just a series of numbers from 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. That's the Fibonacci sequence. So we use the Fibonacci sequence, which is a number, during poker planning. Poker planning is the entire process. So it's the same thing. All right. Let me see. I think okay. I love there's so much conversation going on in the chat section on LinkedIn. So you probably want to jump in on LinkedIn and make sure that you do that. And yeah, as we're rounding up, make sure that you click the share button. I think a couple of people could not actually make it here, and this might be helpful for them as well. And tomorrow I'm also going to be back the same time, and we are going to handle PI planning tomorrow. I'll handle the topic on PI planning tomorrow. So if you definitely have not been in a PI planning or you have questions on PI planning, log in tomorrow. No, it's not going to be the same time tomorrow. Sorry, it's going to be 2 hours earlier tomorrow, but I'm going to put on the post today so that you can come in and just note the time that you want to be in. Right now, there's still so many questions. Unfortunately, because of my time, I need to be in another meeting in the next 10 minutes. I cannot take all the questions, but I'll try as much as possible to. I'll note the question down. Maybe tomorrow I can just reflect them, or I'm gonna follow up the comments in the on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and I'll try to provide a written response for those who I did not respond to their question. But then do not forget to like, do not forget to share. And for those who need coaching, that's my number. Send me a text and get um let's get this going, right? The goal is for us to become the best in what we do. And my last word, for everything you do, the key advice is don't give up, right? Sometimes it's a bit challenging, but it's only challenging when you struggle on your own, right? When you get some help and you situate yourself in a community, you realize that most of this is easier than we thought. Do have a good afternoon. Do have a good weekend. And I'll see you in our broadcast tomorrow. It's going to be 11 a.m. Central Time tomorrow. So I'll see you tomorrow.